Bill, it's a pleasure to meet you. I heard wonderful things about you from PJ. I believe some of them. Some of them we'll find out today how true they are. But in the pre-interview, you mentioned a passion for sheet metal work and a near miss with a career in automotive design of all things. Tell us how this happened. I mean, it's actually been very common. We've had lots of guests on the show that started off thinking they're going to be one thing and ended up being another. So that's not the rare part, but I'd love your story. How did you wind up going from there to where you wound up?
Yeah, so I think this is the lesson in like grit 101, right? Is you thought you were on a path, you thought you had it under control, and then the world went left and you went right. And that's sort of how this happened. I fell in love with, I had a number of passions when I was in high school. I was part of computer engineering. I was part of math and writing and art and automotive, and just was like a part of all of these different things that I really, really enjoyed in theater. And when I came out of school, I decided I was going to combine all of those and I was going to go become the next Pininfarina. Like that was what I wanted. I was like madly in love with the influence that Pininfarina had had on automotive design over the years, and had sort of lusted after the classic Ferraris that he had done and the influence that he had on Fiat and like all of these other things, and managed to convince everybody that I was going to go be a mechanical engineer. And I remember my mother saying to me, "You're about as much of an engineer as I am a toaster, but if you really want to go prove this to yourself, then go ahead and go do it." And I got into Marquette University, where PJ and I met, and ran smack dab into my inability to compete with that math. Like they were so linear, and it was so like prescriptive in terms of its thinking. And here I came with like all this creative writing and this theater and this art and this like all this other stuff. And I showed up and I was like, I'm going to do this great thing. And I remember it was freshman orientation, like school hasn't even begun yet. And I'm at orientation, and a guy from Briggs and Stratton came over and he said, "What do you want to do, kid?" And I was like, "I'm going to design cars like Pininfarina." And he goes, "Oh yeah?" And I was like, "Uh-oh." What happened? He said, "Yeah, I was that guy too." He said, "Let me tell you what happens. The first year, if you're lucky, you get to work on the team that designs the cigarette lighter button." And like, I'm looking at him like, you're pulling my leg, right? And he says, and then year two, if you're really lucky, you get part of the handbrake handle. And then the year after that, maybe you really move up and you've impressed somebody, you get to work on the like little part of the seatbelt that clicks into the button holder. It's like, I'm looking at him, he says, "There are 5 or 6 people alive that do the job you just described. You're never going to be one." And he walks away. And I was like, okay, so that's how that goes. Which was then followed by my running into calculus full bore. I remember the first day of class, and I had aced all of my math classes up to that point. And the teacher comes in and he says, "So here's a function of X when X is in motion." I just remember in a 300-person pit class raising my hand and saying, X is a finite number. He said, "Not in calculus. In calculus, it's moving." And he went back to the blackboard, and I was like, "Wait, it's moving." And that was the end of that. So I made it through the semester, but I wound up going to an interview with my teacher because I was not failing, but I was damn close to it on some of the things. And he sat down and he said, "Look," he said, "I've got 6 PhDs, but I can't do physics." He said, "My brain doesn't work that way." And he said, "Looking at the things you're doing and the kind of math you're doing," he said, "you might be the kind of person who's tenacious enough to stick with it. And you might actually become an engineer, but you'll never be a good one because you don't get the math that way. It doesn't."
Can I tell you, it's amazing to me how many people gave you such hard truths. I'm surprised you were able to get up. Holy cow.
It was
between your mother, which is years of therapy right there, right? I mean,
yeah.
Your mother telling you that, "Oh, are you crazy? You're completely not cut out for that. Now go fail." And then the guy that told you that you'd never do it, and the teacher who told you were going to suck at it. Man,
it was the best year I ever had, because what it did was it set me up for, if this isn't the path, then find the path. And I think a lot of people don't get the luxury of having somebody hit them with a frying pan that way. And I think they go out thinking it's all going to be, this is the way I thought it was going to be, and I'm going to stick with it, and it's going to be great. And when the surprise comes, they're not ready for it. And in this instance, it wasn't that way at all. I had been plenty prepped with people telling me, this path is not what you think it is. It's not what you've idealized it to be. You need to prepare yourself for the reality that's going to come. And fortunately, that didn't happen year 3, year 4. It happened first semester right out of the gate. And in doing that, I was able to pivot to something that I wound up truly falling in love with and spent and dedicated the entire rest of my career to. So I was thrilled that happened.
Very, very cool. It's nice that you had mentors like that in your life right out the gate. I've been thinking a lot about how mentors are very important in the entrepreneurial journey. It's also really lucky that you had someone that you went to school with that kept you on the straight and narrow like I did, because I am sure I was an amazing influence to you in our late teens, early 20s.
Absolutely.
Absolutely,
Case.
I was the air beneath your wings, I'm sure.
Yes, it kept me guided on the wholesome path for sure. I did my homework.
Thank God for
because
PJ.
of you.
Yeah. This is
sure of that.
Already my favorite podcast we've ever done. Just
you say that.
I mean, this is more than Skip Martin, the lead singer of Kool and the Gang. Man, Bill,
I mean, he was amazing. He was amazing.
He was, right? He was. And you know what? I thought of him as Bill was speaking, because here's a guy, right, who's written and sang some of the most popular songs in the history of man, right? Billions of downloads. There's hardly a human being on earth that hasn't heard Celebration, right? And he started off and he believed he was going to do it, and he wasn't going to be deterred. And actually, what's really interesting about what you're telling me, and I think the takeaway I have there, is that those moments where someone confronts you and says, you know what, you're not cut out for this, they are moments of truth. They are not necessarily moments where you must take what they're saying at face value, but they are moments where you have to do some deep reflection. You have to, at that moment, ask yourself, are they telling me something I actually already know? Or is this something I fundamentally disagree with and I'm going to prove them wrong? And it's one or the other. It's one or the other. And you have to have the kind of inner compass, even as a young person, to be able to see whether what they're telling you is just the truth and they're inviting you to find your true purpose, or they're wrong about you and your purpose, and you're going to prove it to them.
Yep.
Don't you find, though, that most people have both in their journey? Because and I think you bring up such a great point, Tal, in that I think when people have, quote unquote, a dream, anything that comes in conflict with it that way threatens that there is no more dream behind it. What I actually wound up finding was a dream that was just as fulfilling and just as interesting. I just didn't realize that potential existed at the time. But oddly enough, not long after that, I had another teacher get in the way of my success by not allowing me into the program. So I wound up finding this program, had a great first year, went to go into the first year was your trial program. And I got to the end of that year and had just sauntered up like I thought I was going to be in it. And he said, no, I didn't invite you into the program. And I stood there looking at him and I was like, what do you mean you didn't invite me into the program? And he was like, well, I just don't think you worked hard enough. And so I made a split decision at that moment. And I said, well, if I stayed here this summer and I committed myself to getting into the program, would I get in? And it was like one of those movie moments where he leans in and he says, I don't know. Did you or didn't you? And I was like, yeah, okay. And I literally walked to a payphone, called my folks and said, I'm not coming home this summer. I'm staying here to do this program, and got in that way. But I think you need those people along the path that say either you're pointed in just a little bit of the wrong direction, or you've got talent that's in there, but you're not applying it as hard as you could. And there were people that got into the program that weren't doing work where I was doing it, but they were giving it their all. And I think what he was waiting for was to see that I was as committed to that as they were. And once he did, then he, opened the door and let me through.
Well, being challenged, I think, is a huge part of the journey, right? You have to sharpen your own iron when it comes to, is this premise good enough? Is this product going to work? Do people want what I am trying to sell? Is the world accepting of what I'm trying to build? And I think that those challenges just help you not only really focus more on what the deliverables are and how good it is, but I think it really helps you whittle down, whether it be an elevator pitch or whether it be a path that you're going to go on. I think it helps you really whittle down what that focus is going to be so that it is as successful as possible.
I fell in love with it. I don't like the positive comments anymore. I live for people poking holes, because the minute that they do, I'll learn something. So it's really strange, but like I got to the place where I was on the other end of it. Like I don't want people going, oh, that's so nice. Oh, that's so great. All I want them to tell me is what didn't work for them or what they hate about it. And that's where I can learn and get stronger on stuff. So it's like a big joke with my team, because I'll tell them during the hiring process, you have to be willing to stand in front of me and tell me I'm an idiot. If you can't tell your boss that he's an idiot, you'll never make it here, because I depend on you coming in and being like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but prove it to me, or I don't think that's going to work, or you're going the wrong direction. And my team has redirected me a number of times on stuff where they were right. And I've redirected them on things that they just hadn't thought through everything. But that relationship is what builds the team and builds the group together. Otherwise, somebody thinks they're the smartest person in the room, or somebody thinks that they're just an executioner or whatever. The dynamic has to be, we're all here just to poke holes until you can't poke holes anymore.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
So no,